나나 수다 되는데 남랭게 상황을이야 자시베게 섬지슈와의 첩지도
Today, I would like to wish you all a warm welcome. Now, many of you are in India and Nepal. So I think it is very important for you to be very careful during this epidemic. They say that these days in India, in that area, that they are not paying too much attention to the epidemic, and they're being rather relaxed about it. And I have some strong feelings about that. I think it is very important for all of you to continue to be very careful about that. So that is something I wish to say. So yesterday, my camera didn't behave well, and so we just ended the teaching for us. And so today I will continue with the remainder of the topic of Dharma Lord Deshin Shekpa's travels to China. Now, after the time of the Tibetan emperor, Tibet was splintered. And so after it splintered, the old Chinese historical documents from the time of the Sung dynasty onwards, it's not certain that usually during the Tang dynasty, they would call they would call the area of Tibet by the Tibetan name Pur or the Tibetan name Tubo. So this was a Tibetan Chinese transliteration of the Tibetan word. And so if we look at the Tibetan Chinese dictionaries found in the Dunhuang manuscripts, it is very clear. So before that, they called it Tubo. But later, from the Sung dynasty onward, they stopped calling it by the name Tibet or Tubo. Instead, they started calling it Uzang. So for that time, so when the Ming Emperor Yongle invited the Lord of Dharma, Deshin Shekpa, they said it's written on the histories that he invited him from Uzang. In any case, the main thing he did was perform the ceremony on behalf of the emperor's deceased parents. Now, in Chinese culture, benefiting your parents is extremely important. So the emperor had completed fast, had invited Deshin Shekpa to perform these ceremonies on the behalf of his parents, and so this is considered one of the greatest acts of service that is considered most important in Chinese culture. Not only that, the Emperor Yongle also had lengthy discussions with Deshin Shekpa on the political strategies to take with regard to Tibet. So I discussed this yesterday, but the main point is that the emperor's first hope was that Deshin Shekpa would do as was done during the Mongol or Yuan dynasty. When Drogon Chöje Pacha had taken both political power and responsibility. And so the emperor had the hope that Deshin Shekpa would do the same. Also, the Yuan Emperor Kublai Khan had given titles such as to Dogen Chöje called such as Precious King of Dharma to Dogen Chöje. And so Yongle also gave these same titles, with just a few minor differences in words, to Deshin Shekpa. And so it seems from this that we can understand that he had a great hope that Deshin Shekpa would, like Dogen Chöje, take both political and spiritual responsibility. However, Deshin Shekpa had no desire to accept any political power or responsibility. Not only, he also explained that if they had done as one done during the Mongolian times, the Yuan dynasty, when the Mongol armies went to Tibet. So he said that if the Ming emperor did the same and sent Chinese armies to Tibet, it would bring strife and turmoil to the people of Tibet. And he also explained that having so many Dharma lineages in Tibet was beneficial to the Tibetan people because it helped fulfill their wishes. Not only did he say that, not only that, he asked them to give the religious and secular leaders of Tibet positions and titles that would show them recognition. And so the Ming emperor, the histories record that the Ming emperor did the same, and gave the titles to the religious and secular leaders. Also, after Deshin Shekpa returned to Tibet, and so the Ming emperor invited Lord Tsongkhapa. So Lord Tsongkhapa was unable to go, but he offered. But he also invited Jamchen Chöje, so from the Gelug order. So in brief, he invited Jamchen Chöje of the Gelug order, Tekchen Chöje of the Sakya, and so forth, and he gave them similar titles as he had for Deshin Shekpa. Even after Emperor Yongle, the Ming emperors continued the tradition of giving religious titles and secular titles to lamas of all the Tibetan traditions. And I think that this would not go too far to say that this occurred because of the thoughts that Deshin Shekpa shared with the Emperor Yongle, that these thoughts had an influence on this practice. Likewise, when Deshin Shekpa was staying in Nanjing, he made many suggestions to the emperor. So in Tibet, there are many. So they had on his suggestion, the emperor had where they released prisoners from prisons. So this is love of ancient beings, and he showed this in his acts many times. So this story of liberation, this example, is similar to a prediction made by the previous Karmapa Rolpai Dorje. He said a pure bhikshu will pass away on this mountain, and if his body is cremated, then there will not be a war between China and India. And so that is where Deshin Shekpa passed away, on that very same mountain. And his body was cremated on that mountain, and so because of that, because of that, because of his successor was able to go to India and invite that and prevent the wars between China and India. Also, when Deshin Shekpa was offered a praise by the Emperor of Gelug, and so it also said he said that the later incarnation of Rolpai Dorje would be able to protect many sentient beings from danger and to bring them happiness. And so understanding this, and he would know this and would take rebirth intentionally. And so that was Deshin Shekpa. And so the person who said this was the Kempo of Gendungan, Samye. He was not a Karma Kagyu Lama. And so for many such reasons, so the Deshin Shekpa had such great acts, did such great deeds in China. They returned to Tibet, and at that time, many people came to welcome him on his return. And even the king of Dharma, Lord Tsongkhapa, also sent a letter to Deshin Shekpa, and the contents of this letter are collected in the short works of Je Tsongkhapa. There are many stanzas in this, and so he says, Tsongkhapa said that for the teaching of the Buddha to flourish, the person who takes responsibility is there's no one like Deshin Shekpa, the Karmapa. And so I don't need to necessarily do you, but you continue to do this. And so this is the praise that Tsongkhapa offered to Deshin Shekpa. Likewise, along with the letter, he sent a statue of the Buddha Shakyamuni sitting in the seated position of Maitreya as well from the Rajang monastery. And that monastery was, even in later times, was brought by the 16th Karmapa when he fled Tibet, and it is brought to Rintak Monastery, and it is kept there. Also, the Rondon Sheje Kunsik, the Sakya master, and many other masters said that he wrote letters saying that it was like a Buddha who had the Buddha returning to this world. And so Je Tsongkhapa recorded that he actually saw these letters. And so there are many other such events. Then also there was a direct disciple of Deshin Shekpa named Jamchen of Tsurpo. And he wrote a liberation story of the Lord of Dharma. And we have this now, and it used to be unavailable before, but now we have it. But it said that during the time Deshin Shekpa was in China, that it wasn't only the officials of various ranks, such as the Ming emperor who came for audiences. There were they spoke many different languages. And so because they spoke so many different languages, Deshin Shekpa would teach Dharma with 4 or 5 translators to his sides and in front and behind him. And so among these people, many of them had traveled for many days, prostrating with each step they took as they came to see Deshin Shekpa. So this is the old Chinese. Tradition. It's doing a prostration for every 3 steps. And so there are many people who came to see Deshin Shekpa, and they traveled in this fashion. And so what Deshin Shekpa did is he primarily had them recite the name mantras of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and to make commitments to such as giving up killing and so forth. And so he inspired them to practice, or encouraged them to practice virtue, as Chinpa's biography of Deshin Shekpa says. Now, what I'd like to say kind of in relation to this, now in the Chinese National Library's collection, so in the Chinese National Library,
Kagyu nangden da Pygyu nangden da Paruli ya ji Parsu gi gyuze Pazu ji Pere
In their connection, there is a text about the exchange between China and Tibet of both Buddhist texts and of printing techniques. And this is called the names, images, and name mantras of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So there is this text, and I'd like to show you this text. Later, they published this text in book form. And so I'd like to show this. So this is the book. And so the name of this book is The Names, Images, and Name Mantras of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And the content of this text is primarily written in Chinese, but there's also the Lensa letters. This is the same as the Ranjana script used by the Newaris in Nepal, and also there's Tibetan and Mongolian and Chinese text. And so at the introduction and conclusion, there are primarily Chinese. And so these three sections here that primarily give the images, names, and name mantras of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And so, and among these three sections, there is an image of Deshin Shekpa, which I show you up to the side. So that is an image of the Dharma Lord Deshin Shekpa. And this was printed in 1431, which is the 6th year of the reign of the Emperor Xuande. And the person who printed it was Deshin Shekpa's Chinese name Xiu Shan, Shuo Shanzhi. Now, in the forward of this text, there are both Tibetan and Tibetan text. Now, the Chinese text has been largely lost, but the Tibetan is more or less complete. And what it says is, and so the Lord of the Dharma Lord Karmapa, the King of Dharma, has shared many of the dharmas and scriptures that he had given, and so these are now printed in this book. And so many people who do research describe this as, say that this is an important text that is a good source for describing how the Tibetan Buddhism spread to the east into the Chinese areas. And so there's a similar text in this. And so another text that is from the Ming dynasty called Je Tsongkhapa. It has the same meaning and the same influence as this text. And the main point of this text is that at the Lingu temple, when Deshin Shekpa had performed the great ceremonies there are the many different auspicious signs, and the music from the sky, divine music from the sky, and everyone saw this and heard about it. And so all of the emperors all went to see the emperor, and there was one educated one, sort of like we would say a doctor these days would say. There's a doctor named Hu Guan. And they wrote the lyrics for a song, which they called Auspicious Omens in the Sky. And so since so it's because it was a service for the emperor's parents, that is why these omens appeared in the sky. And so from that time on, the emperor, of course, had even more faith in Deshin Shekpa and and studied or read the Buddhist scriptures with even more assiduously than he had before. He also just wrote Dharma melodies, and they were performed in song and dance in the palace. The 17th year of Yongle's reign, the emperor finished reciting these elements, and he included it with in a printing of a book with some pictures of the Buddha, and it was distributed widely. Then on the 12th day of the 9th month, the emperor went to Dabaong, in Dabaong's monastery, that if you translate it into English, it would be, say, the monastery, great monastery of repine, the great monastery of repaying kindness. And so at that time, he had it reprinted and spread there greatly. Also in the area of Hai'an, he made sure that the book and the melodies and the words and melodies spread in the area of Hainan. 16th day of the 5th month, that is in the next year, on the 5th month, he asked with the daughter Lu Zhong, and basically we're saying the two ministers to print and spread these texts with the names of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the melodies in Shanzhi and Henan regions. And so the Buddha really, his mind moved in the direction of Dharma. He had such great interest in the Dharma that his queens also had great respect for the Buddha and Bodhisattvas. And for the sake of all the people who had faith in the Dharma, he built many monasteries, both inside and outside of the city of Nanjing. They said it was filled with temples. So when we look at these histories, so I think that this picture, the text whose pictures I've been showing you, is probably an example, is one copy of the text that the Emperor Yongle printed and had distributed. And the reason for this is that so this text of this compilation by the emperor of the names and Dharma melodies spread so widely. So there's probably many of them were printed. So I think that this is probably that. And so I think that this is probably now the text that I am showing you right now. Now, at that time, we said that he wrote Dharma melodies. When we say, I need to explain what we mean by Dharma melodies. Dharma melodies means, as I said before, previously during the time of the second Karmapa, wherever he went, he would wear the black crown. He'd wear the black crown, and he'd sing the Mani mantra and spread that practice. And this is this tradition is recorded in the old histories, right? And so just as during the time of Karmapa, the later Karmapas also continued this form of activity. And so later, also when the Karmapas would wear the black crown, they would also recite the melodies. Now later during the time of the 16th Karmapa, when they wear the during the 16th Karmapa, when he wore the black crown, they would play the Gyalings, but they wouldn't be reciting the melodies. But before, during the time of the earlier Karmapas, it was primarily benefiting people by the Mani mantras, the Mani melody, as that was the melody that was sung at that time. So basically, when you talk about these Dharma melodies that are spoken, I think this is closely related to the Mani melody. Now, most people think that, but no, I think because everyone had seen so many miraculous signs at that time, that people naturally would feel faith and belief in that, right? And so Deshin Shekpa had held these ceremonies and rituals, and every day there were so many auspicious signs that occurred It wasn't just the people of any higher rank, but also within the public, there are many who developed faith and belief. And so
mani ta
many
mani
of them would recite Om Mani Padme Hum day and night. And since they recited so many manis, there was some confusion. There's the Rushan clan, which really practiced Confucianism. They didn't particularly like Buddhism. And so they kind of secretly made a way to, instead they call him the Dharma Kim, right? They say he has if he has articles. And so there's no need to say that because, no need to say Om Mani Padme Hum because he'll know, because the moment you think of him, he'll know. So why would you need to recite Om Mani Padme Hum? Instead of reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, you can't really translate it into Chinese. What you should say is An Ba Ni Hong, which means Om Mani Padme Hum. You should say, instead of saying Om Mani Padme Hum, you should An Ba Ni Hong. And so these days in English, it's the same when we say in English sometimes Om Mani Padme Hum. And so they did the same way. So they're kind of many people say Om Bani Hong, Om Bani Hong. It means I'm flattering you. And so I'm flattering you is what it means. They said it's better to just recite it like that. They say. So there were people who said that likewise at that time. The palace guards at the emperor's palace, when they were on duty, every day they would alternate and be on duty, and they would recite the Mani mantra day and night. And they recited it so much that even Yongle had to criticize him for that. Because instead of doing their guard of jobbing the palace, they're only reciting Mani mantras, and so even Yongle was criticized, saying, "Why are you doing that? Aren't you doing your jobs? You should do your jobs," he said. And so this is also recorded in the histories from that time. So basically, at that time, there are many similar events to this. So what is the relation between having faith in the Karmapa and the reciting the six-syllable mantra? You might wonder, isn't the six-syllable mantra, Mani mantra, isn't that the Avalokiteshvara's mantra? So here, we have to look at this. In this text, there are 63 different images of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And the 26th of these is the image of Deshin Shekpa. Now, if you look at this image, there are the Chinese letters, right? First, there's the Chinese letters. This next line, there is the Lensa and the Tibetan. And then there are the vertical letters, and that is Mongolian writing. And what it says in Tibetan is the mantra of Guru Karmapa, or the precious king of Dharma, Om Mani Padme Hum. It's very, very clear in Chinese, right? In Tibetan, it's not as clear. It says prostrate to the Lord of Dharma, Karmapa, Om Mani Padme Hum. But in Chinese, it's very clear, the mantra of Guru Karmapa, or the precious king of Dharma, Om Mani Padme Hum. And so at that time, it's not like reciting Karmapa Chenyu, as we said today. There is no tradition of saying that as we do these days. And so because there's talk of the Karmapa being an emanation of Chenrui Zik, there was the tradition of reciting the name of the mantra of the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra of Avalokiteshvara. And also, could also have been because Karmapa had emphasized the Mani practice so much that, and also when Deshin Shekpa went to China, he also recited it somewhat. And so for this reason, that is, at that time in China also, there was the six-syllable mantra also spread widely in China. So basically, with the support of the Kagyu emperor, and from that time, the six syllable mantra spread widely in the Ming Dynasty and the Tibetan Buddhism as well. And I think that there is a great profound connection here. So basically, but basically, we say that after the Yongle, the Ming emperors also continued to support and spread Tibetan Buddhism. For example, during the time of the Ming Emperor Xuanzong, during the Ming Emperor Xuanzong's time as well, there were over 1,000 Tibetan monks in Beijing. Likewise, during the times of the Ming Emperor Yingzong, they also prepared a special place to serve Tibetan monasteries, monks and nuns meals, and they also built a monastery for them to stay in. Also, during the Ming Emperor Xiaozong's, Tibetan monks and nuns were brought into the palace to perform rituals. Also, during the time of Ming Wuzong, Wuzong was the one who invited Mikyö Dorje. And so he had even more interest in Tibetan than before. And he also even learned Tibetan. He would wear the robes of Tibetan monks and so forth. And so I'll talk about this. I think I'll speak about this later when I describe this later when I speak about how he invited Mikyö Dorje. Now, when Deshin Shekpa had done the ceremonies at Ling Temple, but he didn't like staying in the city, and so he went to Wutai Mountain, and he spent a long time there. And as I mentioned yesterday, at Wutai Mountain there is the Shandong Temple, and also there is the stupa of the Buddha Ashoka, and these are restored. And so the emperor offered them to the Buddha. And so this is probably the first Tibetan Buddhist temple at Wutai Mountain. Later, after that, the Jamchen Chöje and Tekchen Chöje also went to Wutai Mountain. And so basically, in Chinese Buddhism, there are four sacred places for the four Buddhisms. Wutai Mountain is the sacred site of Manjushri, but this is a different site than the other sacred sites. This is the most important place where both Chinese and Tibetan Buddhists gathered together. And I think that this is because of reasons such as this. Likewise, when we go to one would go to the Ming capital of Beijing, you'd go to the Forbidden City, or into the city, they would sell Tibetan Buddhist images and malls, and also the people buying kapalas or skulls. And so, if you want to get a kapala, how do you get it? You can only get it from the corpses of people who've passed away. And so they dug up many. Many people dug up graves and stole a lot of skulls. And so at that time in China, you're not allowed to dig up cemeteries. This is considered very bad. And so there's many questions where people were prosecuted for this. And so it seems that there were a lot of people in the Chinese capitals and Chinese cities who had a great interest in Tibetan Buddhism and tantric practice. So now, Deshin Shekpa spent basically 2 full years in Chinese. However, his influence was really strong. Likewise, his students continued to stay in China and take the responsibility to spread Dharma in China. To give an example of this, among the people who came to invite Deshin Shekpa from Tibet to China, there was a monk called the Chiguan monk. And later he became a very good practitioner. And he became an important translator from Chinese to Tibetan and back. Another great student of Deshin Shekpa, who was a great translator, was someone who was with Deshin Shekpa when he was in Nanjing, and someone who also brought with him back to Tibet, and whom he gave many instructions that had brought back with him to Tibet and gave him many instructions. And his name was Palden Tashi. And he was one of the most famous Chinese Tibetan translations in the Ming dynasty. So he translated texts from Chinese to Tibetan, from Tibetan to Chinese. And so he he received many instructions on the six dharmas and so forth. He spent a long time in Chinese and teaching many Chinese people and the Chinese ministers into the Dharma. And he lived into the time of until the reign of Inzong. So he had a very long life. And so the emperor gave him the rank and title of the Shijian Buddha. And so there were both monastic students of Deshin Shekpa in China, and also there's many lay people as well. One of the most famous one was the person whom was someone whom Yongle, the Emperor Yongle, had really relied on greatly. The very famous state of Yongle. He went to the west to Tibet 7 times. Oh, sorry, excuse me, went to the west. So he was among the first ones who crossed the oceans to the west. And so is the eunuch Chöje. He was really extremely famous in Chinese histories. He went and he explored and discovered many new places. He was a very important historical figure. And so this is a picture of him. He was a eunuch. He was called the eunuch Zhenghe. How do we know that he's Buddhist? Many histories say that he was Muslim. But the way we know that he is Zhenghe is that in the there's a text printed in the beginning of the Ming dynasty called the Sutra of the Lay Vows. And so this is said that it's written by the eunuch Zhenghe, who had great faith in the Buddhist teachings. Sonam Tashi. And so that he went with armies and great ships. He went across the Western Oceans to work for the emperor. And at that time, as he sailed across the great oceans, he was protected by the Buddhas and able to arrive safely. And so he had no obstacles in the path. And so because he always had such gratitude in the heart, he was able to bring back great wealth. And so in the past, when you would travel by sea, it was extremely dangerous. And at that time, he would pray to the Buddhas and so forth. And for that reason, wherever he went, he was able to arrive there safely. And he always thought that this was the kindness of the Buddha, and because of this, he would go to great expense to print many Buddhist texts. Among them, one event that happened is that on the 5th year of the Yongle emperors, there was they printed the Buddha's words one time, and they kept it at Ling monastery. It is written, and from that time, and during until the 4th year of the Ming Emperor Shungde, he had printed the 10 copies of the words of the Buddha. And he offered these to the great well-known monasteries at the various places in China. Now, when was the 12th, the 11th day of the third month by the Emperor Yongle? That was the day after the Deshin Shekpa had been given the titles by the Mongol emperor, by the Ming emperor. And so Zhenghe went to the Ling monastery. He offered the printed words of Buddha. This is at the same time as Deshin Shekpa was at the Ling temple. And so it is not necessary to mention that he mentioned that he met Deshin Shekpa. We can say that this is the reason he was a student of the Zhenghe. Also, old Chinese historical documents say that there's a clear connection between Zhenghe and Deshin Shekpa, but I was not able to find that right now. So later, Zhenghe, whom I showed this, the one wearing white in the middle, he went to Sri Lanka. And he brought a tooth of the Buddha back from Sri Lanka. And he offered it to the Chinese emperor. Later, the Chinese emperor would wrap that in gold and give it to Deshin Shekpa. So we can see that there was a strong connection between Zhenghe and Karmapa Deshin Shekpa. So we can see from events such as these. So you can see from such events and such that there's a history of the Wutai mountain. And what it says about the topic of Deshin Shekpa, when writing about this, they said that he did not like fame or distractions, and his deeds are difficult for ordinary individuals to conceive of, and because his fame spread throughout China. And so this is writing the actual situations that happen. And so basically, Deshin Shekpa had a very, very strong influence in spreading Tibetan Buddhism among the Chinese people. So we can say that he was probably the first person or the primary person who spread the Buddhist teachings among the Chinese people. Now, because before this, during the Yuan or Mongol time, many great Buddha lamas went. The people in the palaces were primarily Mongolian. And the courtiers were primarily, and ordinary subjects were Chinese. And so during the Yuan dynasty, when the Mongols had power, primarily the Mongolian people of high rank practiced Buddhism, but it didn't. But I doubt that it spread widely among the populace. And these days there are scholars who say similar things. Likewise, and so after, not only did Deshin Shekpa have a great influence on spreading the Buddhism in China and spreading Tibetan Buddhism in China, as he returned to Tibet, he brought many Chinese artifacts, Chinese examples, and very sacred Chinese objects back to like the great the seal, the jade seed that we saw, and also in the this is like one of the greatest, one of the most important artifacts that's held in the Tibetan Museum. There's a, and he brought many and also he also brought many other valuable things back with him to Tibet. And so but many different treasures called the Karma Gengun and so forth back to Tibet. They're considered very important. So these were there's like their cups and so forth that had very different other cups really praised very highly. Not only that, these days in museums, we can do the karma genkara and if you have the karma cups or the karma gendo, you think of these really very very important. And then also antique dealers, if they have artifacts from the time of the Ming Dynasty and from the time of Deshin Shekpa, they can sell them for very, very high price. To give an example, a few years ago, there was a tanka of red Yamantaka. And this was an applique or a sewn tanka. And this applique tanka was actually given by Kagyu Dorje to the king of Sikkim. And the king of Sikkim gave it to a friend who abroad. And a few years ago, it was sold at an auction. It was a very big tanka. And it sold for 48 million American dollars. So if we explain that everything, and so it's because it said that they said all sorts of things about it being from the time of Deshin Shekpa and related to him, and because they're very old. So when I thought about that time, the king of Sikkim was really kind of stupid about it. Someone said to me, if he had kept it, he would have been better off, they say. And so these are the events that happened to that. So I think that is enough about the Karmapa Deshin Shekpa. So after that, I don't need to talk about the connections between the Chinese emperors and the 6th and 7th Karmapas. So now we'll have a break, and after that, I will speak in general about how the Chinese emperor invited Karmapa Mikyö Dorje to China. Can you all hear me? First, I thought I would show you this. So now I'll speak about the so now I'll start speaking about Mikyö Dorje today, because if this were a film, the main character would be Mikyö Dorje. So we say the Mikyö Dorje was invited to China by the Ming emperor. We say that he was invited by the Chinese emperor. The other day I spoke about how he was brought to the region of Zhang. And so the year after he went to Zhang, and then the next year, people came from the Chinese emperor to invite him. Now, who was it? Who was the emperor who invited him? So it was a Ming emperor, whom I will show to you now. It's the 11th emperor of the Ming dynasty, named Zhengde. His most well-known name is Zhengde. He was also called Wuzong Zhou Hao. So that's his actual name. Zhou Hao is his actual name. And he was born in 1491. And he lived until 1521. So those were his dates, 1491 to 1521. The previous Karmapa Chöje said in one text that in his next life, if there were only one Karmapa, he would not bring great benefit to the teachings, so he'd make two Karmapas, he predicted. And so at that time, some people in Tibet said that the Ming Emperor Zhengde was an emanation of the Karmapa. And so there were people who proposed that at that time. Now, Mikyö Dorje wrote in his own autobiography that he wrote at Namche Mountain. And what he said there was, then the victorious Chöje Gyatso said, to protect the teachings of the Buddha in this world, both eminent bodies as both emperor and the one he revered, if the teachings were not protected by power, the unvirtuous actions of degenerate people will not be tamed. In the future, all simultaneously ended bodies as a sponsor and the one he reveres. Thus does explain the and so then the sustained TV said, according to the Chinese emperor, accordingly, the Chinese emperor also said in the I am also an emanation of the Karmapa. And so there's the seventh Karmapa said he will set two emanations. One will be the sponsor, and the one will be the Karmapa. And the one who was probably the sponsor is also the Chinese Emperor Zhengde. And he also himself said that he was the Karmapa. In 1505, as the year that Mikyö Dorje was born, and on that same day, the emperor acceded to the golden throne on that same day, as it is said. The emperor had great interest in many different religions, including Islam, and especially he had a great interest in Tibetan Buddhism. He gave him the title, Da Qing Fa Wang, which can mean the glorious jewel. He gave himself a Dharma name, and he also made a stamp made with that. Not only that, as I mentioned before, he also learned Tibetan. He wore the robes of Tibetan Lama and wore a black crown and said, I am the Karmapa. And so events such as like this are described in the biographies. But it's actually not so important whether or not he actually was the Karmapa, but it is written in the histories that it was said that he was. Now, as I mentioned before, from the time of the fifth Karmapa, Deshin Shekpa, until the eighth Karmapa, Mikyö Dorje, there was a tradition of sending messengers or envoys back and forth from the emperors to the Karmapas and making offerings back and forth. In particular, during the time of the eighth Karmapa, the Emperor Zhengde, what he said was, in the West, there is a Nirmanakaya of Amitabha. He has come for my sake, so he must be invited to China. And so it sent a minister named the eunuch Liu Yun. And below there were also 4 lower eunuchs. Each of them, below there were 10 generals, and each of them had 2,000 or 3,000 soldiers. And also there are 4 Chinese lamas with ranks. Each of us was accompanied by 100 Chinese monks. And the offerings included various ritual objects, dishes for eating food, all made out of gold and silver, also robes and seats. And also they had like over 100 crates of offerings. And they also had an uncountable amount of tea, silk, sandalwood, and other offerings. And they also needed people to port it, so they had porters. They also had the protectors, the military to guard it. In total, there were 70,000 people. Now, I don't know whether it exactly was 70 people, but they say there were 70,000 people. And this is what is written in the histories, in the Tibetan histories. So when they talk about the Taijian, the Chinese word, this means the eunuchs. These are the eunuchs who were kept to serve the empresses. And Mikyö Dorje also wrote in his autobiography clearly, he said, "Bring from the West Amitabha's emanation to benefit me, who is known as the rebirth of the Karmapa, back to this great post." This command was given. And so basically, he was given this command. So what is written about this in the Chinese histories from the time of the Ming Dynasty? It's important for us to know that, because sometimes when we look at we think that there are really great things in the Tibetan histories, but you look at the Chinese history, it's like it's not exactly so. Sometimes there are things written in the Chinese history. And if you look at the Tibetan histories, it's not exactly the same as what's written in the Tibetan. So at that time, if we want to know what exactly is going on at that time, you have to look at both the Chinese and the Tibetan histories. You need to look at both the Tibetan and Chinese histories. And so there is a history of the early Ming Dynasty. It said that the people in this emperor's courtiers said to him that there is a monk in the West who knew 3 times the past, present, and future. And so this is probably because he was said to be Je Tsongkhapa's incarnation, and so for that reason they said that. And so they said that what the people from that backward region say is that he is a Nirmanakaya or living Buddha. So they said this to the Buddha. And so who said this? And there are many who said this, but among them, what if we look at the Tibetan histories, there's one called Domsa Goshi. The first one to inform the emperor about the Karmapa was Domsa Goshi. Seventh Goshi. He was given the title Goshi by the seventh Karmapa Chöje. He was sent to China by the Karmapa, probably by the seventh Karmapa. And when he was first, he said at first he was sent by the Karmapas, and they didn't believe him. And so at first they put him in prison. He spent several days in prison, but later they believed him and released him from prison. And they asked him questions. And the Domsa Goshi spoke about the Karmapa. And so when they spoke, they developed some interest in the Karmapa. Now, if I go to the actual histories that read, during the time of Yongle, you sent the welcome parties. And so they're saying that they sent 2 people to invite. So during the time of the Yongle, and so he looked at uncovered the manuscripts about how the Yongle and other Ming emperors had invited him, and he sent the 2 people or sent the messengers or the envoys. And he sent a lot of great offerings and so forth that he actually depleted the royal treasury. And so he made so many offerings. He sent many offerings to them after the Karmapa, but he also brought many offerings for the for the retinue. And so he sent so many offerings that they actually emptied the treasury. So this is recorded in the sentences. And sometimes in Tibetans we say that they emptied the treasury of gold. But actually they did empty the treasury of gold. And so he said that you have 10 years to go back and then bring him back. So this is as it was described in the old Chinese histories. But we, what's written in the histories, the Tibetan histories related to Mikyö Dorje, so that the successor to Chöje actually had very little faith in the divine, but because it was sent by the emperor, he had no choice but to go. So what he thought himself as since the Karmapa was given such since I was given such a strong order by the emperor, if I don't, but I'm going to. He thought to himself that. He thought that if Karmapa did not accept the invitation now, he should use military force to abduct him and bring him back. And so his thought is not entirely. So his intention was not entirely pure. And so he had the many people and the soldiers and porters and all the other associate people. There are somewhere around 70,000 people. It's difficult. 70,000, it's difficult to mind around it, but this is written in many old documents, including Mikyö Dorje wrote this, Paul Solokonda wrote this, and many other authors. So I'm going to take it as just, that's what it was. It was 70,000. So a whole lot of people came. And then we came to the place called Rabgang. That's where they all stopped. And the eunuch meant us to stop there. The reason why that is because they went straight into Tibet. From oneness perspective, because there are so many of them, they would have caused great problems for the people, and also because the minister actually didn't want to go there. He had said that as he goes along, he had people singing songs and dancing for him. And so when they got to Tibet, so it's a difficult path, and so he stayed there, and he sent people off to see the Karmapa and said, "Please go," and sent people, and he just stayed, enjoying himself back at the camp. He probably said a lot of people. And they probably sent parties, 3 or 4 different parties to the encampment. But Mikyö Dorje did not accept, no matter how many people said. He didn't give any clear answers. In the end, in 1520, the mentor himself went to deliver the invitation. And so he didn't bring everyone with him. He probably brought 10,000 people with him. And the day that he arrived to deliver the invitation, the minister himself came, went to Mikyö Dorje and offered him kata and so forth. And the next day, the Kai's emperor, the emperor's invitation arrived. And so they also, there was a large book in the Jamchen. They kept a book with a record about how you should appropriately the invitation of the emperor. And so they looked at that, and then the next day, and so then they did that appropriately. And then the next day they brought the offerings from the queens and princes and ministers, and most of the other offerings arrived, and they were to be given. So most of the things that were supposed to be offered the gondola shrine was earned, and they're to be set up as offerings at the encampment shrines. But when the first Mikyö Dorje saw that that the omens were not good, and Mikyö Dorje also had a pure vision of Avalokiteshvara. He had said that the emperor would not live very much longer. He would soon pass away. So it'd be better for you not to go, Avalokiteshvara said. And so Mikyö Dorje had this vision. And because he had such that and other similar visions, he said, "I'm not going to China." He did not accept to go to China. However, the minister, had a very strict order. And so if he didn't bring Mikyö Dorje back, it wouldn't work out. So he tried to do a lot of different things. And what he did, he started giving gifts to the steward or Changze. So Mikyö Dorje was only in his teens, and so the minister gave the gifts to the steward and tried to submit it and said, if you do this, I will give you the rank of a Gui Gompa. So Gui Gompa is like this during it was like the highest realm, the highest rank in the encampment of the Gui Gompa. And so so these two are like these things are this is like ping and shang, like noodles and meat. The meat are always very good. So they are getting together very well. And so when they're deciding about what to do, the steward said, if the Karmapa won't go, so what I should do is this. You've had so many offerings, right? And this is really well known in Tibet. So now you've brought so much. If you have the offerings that 10,000 people had to carry, then it had to be a whole lot of offerings. And so you should say that now you're not going to give the offerings. And so don't give him the offerings until he accepts to go. Yeah, then you have to stay and keep insisting that he go. At that time, at the Garchen, in the great encampment, there were a lot of people. There were great lamas, and all the great lamas and important people got together. And so there's a Gyatamba, Sormampa, Ling, Chama Goshri, the Dhamma Discipline Master, and all of the important people in the encampment got together and had a discussion. They had a meeting. In the meeting, they said, what do we should do? The Karmapa is not going to go. And if he doesn't go, what we should do is, let's not do this. What we should say is this. Say that he's going to go on some particular date. He's going to go. He's not going to go. In the future, on this month, on this date, he will go. If he takes the offerings, if he doesn't take the offerings, then it's not respected. So he will accept the offerings. And he also makes some gifts to the minister and everyone else who came to inland because they went a lot of difficulty. And you should send a letter to the emperor in the Karmapa's name, and everyone can go back. And if you do that, then there wouldn't be any published from it because it says on the document, we can't go right now. And so when the people delivering the invitation return, then they would go back. So there wouldn't be any harm to them if they go back. There wouldn't be any fault. So if most of the most of the people in the party should go, but 2 eunuchs could remain at the encampment. And so that was the discussion that they had, the agreement they made. And when they had this discussion, and then they asked the Karmapa, and the Karmapa said, and so the Mikyö Dorje spoke to the master and said, the omens are not good for me to go now, but in order that you not be punished when you return, I can promise that I will go later. And when they said that, then the minister didn't accept that at all. He said, I couldn't expect it. He just shook his head. And he probably said, pushing, or no good. And he said, no. What he was saying, because he had some sort of a certainty. And he had some certainty because he had made the secret connection with the Changze, or the standard. So he has like some confidence. And if you had to if you would be able to bring the Karmapa back to the emperor, they'd have like a great status. And so he pretended to get angry, and he took all the offerings and immediately left. You can go or not. As I'll send I'll send armies to destroy the 9 regions of Tibet and Kham, he said. And he went to a place that's 2 station posts away. So these are so this is probably a place a day or two's travel away. I'm pretending to be angry. And so then when he left, and what the steward said, what he said, oh, I need to go see him off. I need to escort off, and went off with him. So I don't know if they had some sort of discussion. So the steward went off with the minister, and they went off. They got off, and they started speaking. And when they talked about what they do, so we shouldn't do that. So what we should do? We should bring him back by force. You've got the army, so bring him back in a force way. You should bring some soldiers and immediately abduct him by force. And when they spoke about this, so also the Jamchen Gushe and others, the great lamas in the Tibet, heard about this. And when they learned this, they immediately, the Karmapa immediately went secretly to Tibet, to central Tibet. So at that time they were in eastern Tibet. When they heard about the situation, thought this is the goods, they immediately, the Karmapa and his entourage were brought to central Tibet. Mikyö Dorje wrote about it, this in his biography, where he said, 70,000 envoys of the great Lord of Humans came when I was 14 years old. They ordered that I go immediately to the Chinese emperor's guru. At that time, I was not yet an adult, and even if I were, I did not have in my being even a fraction of the qualities to be the spiritual master of an Nirmanakaya emperor. I was discouraged and despaired of my karma. What is the fault of why I had such a title as being known as the Karmapa? They supplicated me repeatedly, saying I do not have the power to go above the emperor's envoy. They planned to take me, and at that time I refused very earnestly. The retinue of the envoys became haughty and departed. So saying that they arrived when he was 14 years old, and saying, "Go, you have to go immediately," they said. And he said, "I can't go. I'm really, and since I'm so young, if I have to go and be the emperor's main guru, I don't have any qualities, and I don't have the confidence to go or the skills to go. So getting this title of Karmapa is given such incredible difficulty. So how did that happen? So I can't go," I said. So now I've just got the name of the title of Karmapa, but I don't have any other qualities. In particular, I don't have the power or the education to be the emperor's teacher. And so he said that, but they're about to take him away without any control. And at that time, he said very earnestly, "I'm not going to go." And so at that point, the envoy, the emperor's envoy, got very, very angry and left. So I believe basically what happened at that time is that the steward and those people, when the minister had pretended to get angry, gone off to a place a day or two later. The steward went with him. They made the plan to abduct the Karmapa by force, and the other Rinpoches and so forth, the great lamas in the encampment brought the Karmapa to Tibet, and at that point the minister had no choice but to go. And so as they traveled back, it really didn't go well for them, because they were met by a lot of bandits, because everyone in Tibet knew of all the valuable things. And so they came day and night. And they'd come to a place. They'd kill people, they'd kill everyone they could. They'd take away all the place. So that 100 soldiers would die. And most of the things were lost. And whatever was remembered, the soldiers took themselves. In the very end, there was like nothing that could happen, and there's nothing to do. So the master doesn't. He had some sort of a good fence. He was able to escape and able to get to Chengdu. And so it's going to be called the current day Chengdu. So there's a situation that happened. So please don't tell anyone. You can't tell this to the emperor, because he had really had such a great responsibility. If the emperor found out, he'd be. So he told everyone about this. And so he went back to Peking. Something worked out for him, and when he got back, and at that time, the Ming emperor the Chinese emperor had passed away. The emperor had passed away, but after him there was another emperor, of course. And so this person later found out about how badly his work had gone. I was almost about to execute him, but he had many different connections, and they made a request, and they said, and he was almost executed, but it wasn't. But he was stripped of all his ranks. And he was demoted, and he was made into a gardener. And so that is, so basically at that point, the great offerings from the Karmapa made, the Karmapa couldn't receive. It was taken by all the bandits on the road. They couldn't make any offerings. The masters were met by bandits. Everything was taken. All the soldiers were lost. And after not long afterwards, the emperor also passed away. And in this situation, it's not only was that the situation that happened, but later in Chinese, there were many natural disasters that occurred in China. And so what people said about this on the people in the public is because that master didn't do as the emperor didn't do his job right, didn't make the offerings, and the Karmapa was displeased, and so that is what they happened. And so this talk of this spread widely among the public. This is said in the autobiography. At that time, the emperor, lord of humans, his life exhausted, passed to a different realm. Had I gone, there would have no point other than to get tired. It is not that I had the ability and power to accomplish the great emperor's wishes, but did not. Since I lacked the ability and to accomplish them, O emperor, whether you're an emanation or not, if there's any wrong, I confess. Please forgive me. So Mikyö Dorje knew that after that the Ming emperor passed away, and so that time, so even if I had gone at that time, it wouldn't have brought any benefit, because by the time, even if I had gone, by the time I'd arrived, the emperor would have already passed away. And so for that reason, I didn't even have any ability to accomplish the emperor's wishes. And it's that I lacked the so everyone says that if you're an emanation, it's talked about him being an emanation of the Karmapa or not. And if he is an emanation, then I offer my confession before him. So he asked had made it and confessed it before him at that time. Now, the minister, his position turned out very badly. Now, what happened with the steward? The steward and the minister had gone together, and so the steward later, so everything he had, in the end, he lost everything that he had, and later he returned to the encampment when it was in Gongpo. And so he just came and had nothing else to do. He had probably taken a few of the offerings, but he didn't get them. He didn't get on them. Eventually, when the encampment was in Gongpo, he went very, very meekly with his tail between his legs. And so everything that he had got, he offered to the Karmapa. So he gave everything he had to the Karmapa because he hadn't done a good job. Anything that the minister had given him as a gift, he gave to the Karmapa because he hadn't done his job well. So at that time, if we look at it on the outside, people are doing their jobs poorly. People saying the Karmapa, said the Karmapa is invited by the emperor. He should go. If you have so many offerings, you should take the offerings. He should go. So the Karmapa didn't know what he was doing. He should have gone. Likewise, forget about the offerings. He was not able to speak about be able to take the office, and all these bad situations. So many people said different things because of all the problems. The Karmapa didn't do it right. The Karmapa has no merit and so forth. People said something, but the actual meaning is the pure meaning is that this is actually an example of attachment to enjoyments. He had no attachment to a good name or so forth. He did what was ever in his mind. He wouldn't necessarily go do something just because someone was giving him offers, or the Ming emperor was well known, so he should go. He didn't think in that way. Mikyö Dorje himself, from the time he was young, his character was different from others. He was someone who really stood on his own foot. And no matter what anyone else said to him, he didn't follow them. He would think and examine and do the work the way he wanted to. I've lost my connection for a moment. And so for that reason, he didn't go. And so him not going actually turned out very well, because if he had gone, when he had arrived in China, it would have been at the same time that the emperor had passed away. And the emperor after him did not have much faith in the Dharma. And so when we look at these many reasons, we can see it his action is good. So it's only later that we could recognize that. And so for that reason, when we look at the life stories of the great beings, if we think about it, you sort of wonder, well, what is that? Why they do that? Maybe it would have been better for them to do something else. So if some people, when we're looking at it, we can only really see what's in front of us. We can't see anything else. And so when we think about the deeds of the gurus, we can't get our minds around them. And so what is this? Why are they doing that? But then only then you can think that the examples that the deeds of the great masters were good, and that they're right, that they did the right thing. So sometimes it takes a couple centuries to know that the many situations. So it's only after a couple centuries we can know that what they did good, what they did was good. There are many great masters in Tibet, and during their time that no one thought about them good. People thought, oh, they should do what I think. They're not doing this. But then later, when you look back at them from a couple hundred years later, you said actually what they were doing was good. It's because we're so obscured by ignorance that we can only see what is in front of us, and we can't really see the entire picture. And so for that reason, this is the way that the Ming emperor invited Mikyö Dorje, and how he was unable to accept the invitation and see the Chinese emperor. So tomorrow, I think about every day. I have to think about, I'm going to myself a lot of what I'm going to speak about tomorrow. Anyway, so I'm going to say all this stuff, and then be unable to prepare it, and then tomorrow. So I got a headache and get dizzy. That's what happened. So I need to think about it before I say anything. Oh yeah. So tomorrow. So I didn't have any chance to speak about either the good deeds or the praise he searched thoroughly. So I'm going to teach from either the good deeds or the praise he searched. And maybe if there's tomorrow, maybe I'll give an introduction to the the encampment, because I've been speaking about the encampment over the time. But if you don't know what the encampment is, you probably can't even have like a conceptual idea of what it is. So when you talk about So if I give you a rough explanation of what the great explanation was, what the encampment was, then you can understand. You'll be able to have some image will come to your mind. And so I thought I should speak a little bit about the Garchen tomorrow, or the great encampment tomorrow. And so that is probably enough. It's probably better to leave it there today.